depend on food handouts. What are your concerns about food shortages in Southern Africa? That is our question of the day. We'd love you to answer it at SABC Newsroom on Twitter. That's where you can send us your contribution. Also, the community of Umvezo in the Eastern Cape will be receiving a brand new state-of-the-art school facility. A unique farm school project in Mozambique is changing the lives of scores of young people there. Later, we talk to the man who freed Yolandi Korki in the Yemen. He's negotiator Anas Al-Hamati, and he's in South Africa. We close with a look at a brilliant project that deals with xenophobia in our communities. But first, let's get today's news from Newsroom.
Good morning, I'm Anine Dormal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. South Africa's economic growth is expected to remain weak today. This as Statistics South Africa will release second quarter gross domestic product figures. Meanwhile, Chinese stocks sank again this morning despite a rebound in markets elsewhere in Asia. That's following yesterday's carnage as the world's financial markets reacted to the downturn in China's economy. The Transport Department says it will abide by the recommendations of the Public Protector into financial irregularities at the Passenger Rail Agency. Thuli Madonsela has found evidence of widespread impropriety in the awarding of tenders and urged steps against ALSIT CEO Lucky Montana. Meanwhile, Montana says he will approach the court to request that the Public Protector report on the irregularities be set aside. Judgment against 8 former police officers accused of murdering Mozambican taxi driver Mido Masia is expected today in the High Court in Pretoria. The accused have all pleaded not guilty. Lawyers for Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir are expected to lodge an appeal when he appears in court again next month for sentencing. Yesterday, the NPA finally secured a conviction against Krejcir. The High Court in Johannesburg found him guilty of charges of kidnapping, attempted murder and drug dealing. Krejcir's 5 co-accused, including 3 Hawks officers, are also convicted. The Portfolio Committee on Education in the Northwest Legislature will be conducting an oversight visit this morning at the Northwest Secondary School for the Deaf in Leeudoringstad. 3 children died in the blaze at the school in the early hours of yesterday morning. 13 others were left injured. Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe is expected to touch on the country's recent economic problems today. This when he presents the country's State of the Nation address. It will be his first address in years, and it comes days before the official opening of Parliament. And Sierra Leone has released its last known Ebola patient from hospital. Yesterday, the country began its 42-day countdown to being declared free of the virus. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anina. Last week, the leaders of 15 Southern African countries gathered for an annual summit. Amongst other things that were discussed at the summit is the issue of food shortages, as the region is facing what is considered the worst food shortages in more than a decade. It's estimated that about 27.4 million people out of the region's combined population of around 292 million will be depending on food handouts by the end of this year. Continued droughts and unpredictable weather phenomena are said to be some of the contributing factors to the dwindling production of corn that forms part of a stable diet in most households across Southern Africa. For the first time in 7 years, South Africa announced that it would be importing around 900,000 metric tons of yellow maize from Mexico. Now, today we are joined in studio by David Orr, who is the Communications Officer for Southern Africa of the United Nations World Food Programme. A very good morning to you, David. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Really, how bad is the situation with regards to food shortages in, let's say, the outlook for Southern Africa?
I'd say the situation is fairly bad. Earlier on this year, we were looking at a sort of major regional food crisis. I'd say, to be more specific, it's confined to a number of countries. I think we're going to have acute food shortages and acute food insecurity, more particularly in Malawi, very bad. We're looking at about 2.8 million people who are facing hunger later on this year, early next year. Same in Zimbabwe, very badly hit, about 1.5 million or more people who will be facing hunger during the coming lean season.
What kind of interventions are you at the World Food Programme looking at in these countries?
Well, most immediately we are looking at working with the government and other partners to bring food assistance to those most in need. And we're obviously talking about the most vulnerable households, the poor particularly. Our interventions are mostly food distributions, but where possible we are also giving cash and vouchers to the most needy people in sort of areas where market conditions allow that kind of intervention.
The outlook's rather dire. It looks 1 in 10 across Southern Africa affected by this. If we have to look back a little bit, what are the overlooked factors that have brought us to this situation? We understand, of course, that there are factors with regards to the climate and so forth. But what are some of the other factors that have brought us to this situation?
Well, things like disaster risk reduction, disaster preparedness are very, very important. And I think we have seen quite a lot of that, particularly in countries like Mozambique, who have really stepped up those sort of early warning systems and, as I say, the disaster preparedness, so that if a cyclone hits now in Mozambique and there are floods and whatever, the situation is likely to be much better than it was 10 years ago. But we need much more to scale up this kind of thing, much more right across the region.
Zimbabwe today, well, the State of the Nation address is awaited there by President Robert Mugabe. Yesterday, he denied that most Zimbabweans were reeling under extreme poverty and are battling to feed their families. What is your expectation from today? And also, what is the situation like, in your opinion, in Zimbabwe right now?
Well, I've visited Zimbabwe fairly recently, and it was pretty extraordinary to see. I drove right across the country, and there were huge areas of the countryside lying fallow, really. No visible production in those arable areas. In fact, production of maize is down about 50%. It's really serious, about 50% on last year. So hunger is going to hit an awful lot of people, particularly in the south. As I say, in excess of 1.5 million people. Poor households going to be very badly hit. They're usually in the lean season. You know, people they've got dwindling food stocks. It's going to hit much earlier this year, as from this month already. We're starting to see coping mechanisms, you know, people selling cattle if they have them, that sort of thing, just to survive.
Elsewhere in the region, are we seeing an increase in people going hungry? We've seen food insecurity in the rest of the SADC nations, for that matter. Are you seeing more and more people going hungry in the SADC region?
Yes, we are. As I say, there are pockets. I've mentioned Zimbabwe, Malawi. Lesotho is also looking pretty bad. Southern Madagascar is bad. Parts of Angola. There's a huge swathe of Southern Africa that was affected by drought and erratic weather. So that's where we're seeing hunger hit mostly.
Well, David, thank you very much for joining us today. Communications Officer, Southern Africa of the United Nations World Food Programme, Mr. David Orr, joining us today to talk about, well, the escalating situation with regards to food shortages here in Southern Africa. All countries are affected by the looks of it. Our question of the day asks you, what do you think of this issue of food shortages across Southern Africa. There is a question of the day at SABC Newsroom is where you can send us your contributions. Now, of course, very much in the news, former PRASA CEO Lucky Montana says he will approach the court to request that the Public Protector's report on irregularities at the Passenger Rail Agency be set aside. Advocate Thuli Madonsela's report yesterday painted Montana as corrupt and found evidence of widespread maladministration and impropriety in the awarding of tenders. Montana, who was ousted after these reports of irregularities started to surface last month, has denied all allegations against him. He says the report is riddled with dramatic factual inaccuracies.
Done the truth on this particular matter, and I've asked my lawyers to say, I want this report to be taken on review and set aside in its entirety.
Let's take a look now at what you're saying about this story on social media. Of course, at SABC Newsroom is where we interact with you. These are some of your views with regards to, yesterday's goings on. Let Lucky Montana challenge the Public Protector's report. It's good for accountability, not another investigation. Prove her wrong. Yes, says the beloved. So Lucky Montana's unceremonious departure was meant to happen. I hope he hasn't claimed his pension yet. He must bring back the portion of the loot, says the Marion. Lukulemanko says it's no surprise that Lucky Montana rejects the findings of Thuli Madonsela on the PRASA report. Mr. Vananda, you know what's strange? Thuli Madonsela hasn't found any corruption at PRASA, as per her report, says Joe. Now let's move on and take a look at our picture of the day. This one comes from Newsnish and it comes out of Nepal. It's captioned, Nepal clashes at protest over constitution leaves. 8 people dead there. There's a picture of that protest that was happening in Nepal yesterday. Let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We're starting in the United Kingdom. The Daily Telegraph. Well, the Daily Telegraph reports that China's benchmark exchange in Shanghai opened this morning 6.4% after shrinking by more than 8% yesterday. It rebounded slightly throughout the morning, but is still deep in the red by 4.33%. We stay in Europe. The Times also leads with that story. More than $1 trillion was wiped from the value of companies worldwide yesterday as panic about the economic health of China tore through leading financial centers. And finally, New York, the International New York Times rolling everything in its path. A wave of tens of thousands of migrants and refugees, many fleeing wars in Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan, has worked its way up the length of the Balkans in recent days. That's on the front page of the International New York Times. Quick look now at what's happening in the courts today here in South Africa. We start in Johannesburg, where the bail application of the 24-year-old grandson of Nelson Mandela, who is charged with rape, is expected to continue in the Magistrates Court. The rape allegedly took place at a pub in Greenside here in Johannesburg. Mandela believed the sex was consensual. Then in Pretoria, the judgment against 8 former police officers accused of murdering Mozambican taxi driver Mido Macia is expected to be handed down in the High Court today. The 8 men have all pleaded not guilty. Macia was dragged behind a police van and later died of his injuries. Then in KwaZulu-Natal, the 2 men accused of killing Dr. Bhavesh Shuram are expected back in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg. Yesterday, the court heard that the bullet recovered from his body was fired from a pistol allegedly found in the possession of one of the accused. That's what's happening in the courts around the country here in South Africa. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
Nelson Mandela keeping a watch over a myriad of statues, from generals and presidents to literary figures and humanitarianists. More recently, those who fought for freedom.
So there's no need to destroy. If at the end of the day the statue has to be removed from where it is, it will be removed.
President Jacob Zuma and his counterparts will witness the signing of a number of bilateral trade and investment agreements.
Campaigns to eradicate racial discrimination and hostility succeeded. The nation now rallies behind President Paul Kagame.
Catch all news locally and internationally. Tune into SABC, your #1 news channel, news at 8 from Monday to Sunday.
Welcome back. Excitement is mounting at former President Nelson Mandela's birthplace, Umvezo, outside Mthatha in the Eastern Cape. President Zuma is set to open a newly built and registered Makgatho Lewanika Mandela Junior Secondary School there. About 30 million rand has been injected into the construction of the school named after former President Nelson Mandela's son, Makgatho. The school was established as a result of the Education Department's rationalisation program. It merged 2 local schools in the area, struggling with low learner numbers, and is the latest in a string of Mandela legacy projects aimed at empowering disadvantaged communities throughout our country. Now, for more on this, we are joined by our reporter, Unathi Bingos, who's live in Umvezo. He will be talking to the Premier of the Eastern Cape this morning. Very good morning to you, Unathi. Before you do the interview, just set the scene for us.
Very good morning to you, Eben, and a warm welcome to Umvezo. Indeed, it is an outside broadcast, and we are coming to you live from Lewanika, Makgatho Lewanika Mandela Primary School. It is a measure, of course, as you've rightly pointed out, of 2 schools that were struggling with numbers here. That is Nkwenkwezi as well as Umvezo Primary School, and together they've become Makgatho Lewanika Mandela Primary School. And what I can tell you is that things are building up a little bit here, and we do expect them to hit up a notch as soon as the president gets here. But it is going to be excited. We are seeing a lot of kids here that are playing. I'm sure they are oblivious to what is happening here. They are just happy to have some time away from the classroom and get to enjoy themselves. However, the teachers are fully aware of what is happening here, and they are aware of the significance of this day here. And we do have a privilege of being joined by one of the teachers here. Of course, we were supposed to be speaking to the Premier. However, we've managed to grab this teacher here who teaches at Makgatho Lewanika Mandela. Ma'am, a very good morning to you and a warm welcome to Newsroom. Tell me, how's the mood like among the staff here?
I'm so thanks to our chief, Swelivelile Mandla Mandela, to renewing our school. So thanks very much.
What a note, I shall hold this for you. But I'm sure you guys are very, very excited. I mean, it's a beautiful school that you've got here, and I'm sure that will boost the morale of the staff and learners alike.
Yes, it gives us an extra effect to teaching and learning. We have the computers here, lab science. We got the library. It gives us an effort to an extra effect to teaching and learning.
All right, ma'am, it may sound like nothing, but that's all that we needed from you. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been a pleasure working with you. Well, that was one of the teachers here, Ma'am Pafa. She was telling us about what is happening here and how it has boosted the morale of the staff and, of course, the morale of the teachers. These were 2 schools that were really, really struggling with numbers and struggling with infrastructure also. Now they do have a state-of-the-art, a beautiful piece of architect, a school that you'd not normally expect to see in a rural setup like this. And I'm sure that it's going to do a lot to the lives of these young ones, and it's going to motivate them to try and achieve a bit more. I mean, it's one of the many investments that have been done on education in this village. We do have the Nelson Mandela School of Science and Technology, not very far from where I'm standing. It is one of those top-notch schools, and this one promises to be on that level also. It's not just a primary school. Behind me, as you can see, this playing equipment here, there is also a wing that is a preschool, and all the kids are here, and they are having a really good time, and they are looking forward to seeing their president a little later. We are expecting to get here at around 11 o'clock, and judging by the actions happening outside there, you can tell that his arrival is not really far off. I mean, we've seen the law enforcement officials picking up in numbers and intensifying their actions, and we do expect that some of the dignitaries will arrive in no time. The Premier of the province is already here in Umtata. He is expected to arrive here in no time also. We do expect the Minister of Basic Education, Mama Inji Mutsecha, is also expected to be here, and a whole host of other senior government officials were expected to grace this event. And of course, you may have seen some of our viewers on Morning Live. I mean, all right. You may have seen on Morning Live, Miss World is also part of this gathering here. As an ambassador of goodwill, they are involved in quite a number of projects that are aimed at empowering young people, and especially rural people like these ones. With that, let's wrap and hand back to you guys in Joburg.
Thank you very much to Unathi Bingwasi, who will be covering that event for the rest of today. We move on. In an effort to alleviate poverty and reduce the high rate of unemployment in Mozambique, Chebo Servco has developed a farm school initiative called the Fazenda Mizimo Farm Project. The initiative is aimed at creating a sustainable future for Mozambicans by training hundreds of local small-scale farmers to become commercially successful. More than 12,000 jobs are expected to be created through this project that will benefit thousands of Mozambicans. Now, joining us in studio this morning is the Chief Executive Officer at Chebo Servco, Mr. Tim Macon. A very good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Eben.
An interesting project. Tell me why and how did you start this farm school initiative, and why do you think such an initiative is so important to Mozambicans and Mozambique's wider economy?
Well, I think, first of all, our operation in Mozambique called Servco has a significant amount of business up in the Tet province area. The easy way to trade there, certainly in our catering elements, is to just bring our needs through from South Africa and small items from Maputo, but that doesn't service the communities that we operate within. So we took a decision that rather than doing the normal CSI of writing a check and feeling good about yourself, to truly get involved and develop with one of our suppliers a real legacy project that would add true value long after Servco has maybe reduced its operations in Tet province.
What will you be training in or teaching in these schools? Is it a fact that maybe students will be able to get the equivalent of a diploma or degree in agriculture or farming aspects when they go through these programs?
No, it's not leveled at that kind of quality. What it's designed to do is take the small growers who's historically grow what their fathers taught them to grow, and their fathers taught them to grow, to say, first of all, let's test your soil and see what you should be growing there. Then the market can absorb this range of crops. Why don't you grow those rather than just what you think you should be growing? And then there's a significant body of training through the classrooms we've developed that teaches the guys on the farms about crop rotation, about the various forms of irrigation, generator maintenance, and then there's a sidearm that teaches them the basic commercial elements of running a small business.
The 5-year outlook for this project, where would you like to see this project in 5 years' time?
I think certainly if we can get the 4,000 hectares fully up and running, which is very, very feasible, then that first stick in the ground will have been achieved in terms of the 3 jobs per hectare. And we believe, although we can't measure it yet, there's a substantial amount of secondary work in terms of people coming up as bookkeepers, people becoming maintenance guys for the tractors. There is a lot of junior work. Some of the ladies are already stepping forward to start growing seedlings and become business ladies in that element to supply the small growers.
Well, I wanted to ask you about empowerment of women within these communities. Is that also then a key element of the project?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the ladies need to be around the home because of the work they do with the family. And going into the seedling business, going into the bookkeeping business allows them to do that while earning a living that was previously outside of their reach.
And what about the reaction from the local communities, but also from the Mozambican government with the kind of project and the outlook that you're putting forward?
It's been very, very strong. In fact, when we officially opened it, the past president, Gabuza, came himself to officially cut the tapes and open the project.
Yeah.
We also have won awards through Orlindo, our farm manager. He's received significant donations of farming equipment and tractors from government because of the work and the potential of this site.
Now, a little bit earlier, we started the show off by talking about food shortages that are looming. We spoke to the UN about this, food shortages that are looming in Southern Africa. This project will be affected by drought because Southern Africa has been affected by drought in the last decade, really. How do you expect this how the climate to affect the project that you do?
Well, I think that what we'd like to see, the model in a very small way, in comparison to your previous piece, where we've taken land that was essentially sustaining families, and we are now drawing 30 tons of produce a month from it. On a very small scale through maybe 100 hectares. Imagine the tonnage on 4,000 hectares and the potential if this model can be replicated, for instance, in Zimbabwe that you were talking about before. We want to replicate it in Cabo Delgado as well. We talk about that Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Africa, really. Do you foresee these kind of projects being the let's call it the match that can light the fire of really bringing farming back into Southern Africa, despite the weather or the climate? We would hope so. It needs time to prove itself and get some legs and some inertia of its own. But I think in time to come, people will look at these kind of projects and say, we need to be part of that.
Thank you very much for joining us. That is the Chief Executive Officer at Chebo Surfco, Mr. Tim Macon, joining us this morning, of course, talking about a unique project in Mozambique where small-scale farmers are becoming commercially successful with the help of Surfco there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Of course, yesterday we were joined by Professor David Musoma from the CRL Commission. The Commission announced last week that, of course, they'll be launching an investigation into the commercialization of religion and what it called the abuse and exploitation of people's belief. We ask you, the viewers, to the question, should all churches in South Africa be investigated and regulated? And here are two of the best ones that we picked up to show you what you guys were feeling passionate about yesterday. Kasatu came out and says, workers are in churches and we argue that letting worshippers eat snakes must be eradicated. That one from Kasatu today. Yesterday they sent that to. Then Pumlani sent us another one. She says, at SABC Newsroom, yes, it's needed because we can't trust anyone or any church. Think about that's where we've come with regards to church and worshipping here in South Africa. Of course, today's question deals with food shortages and food security here in Southern Africa. The outlook until the end of the year is not that great. What are your concerns about food shortages in Southern Africa? That's the question right there on screen. Send us your contribution and we'll put it up tomorrow, very much like we did there with our question yesterday that dealt with churches here in Southern Africa. Time for us to take a look at what's on Newsroom's Facebook page. For more news updates, of course, you can search just for SABC Newsroom on Facebook. Are we seeing the Facebook page? No, we're not seeing the Facebook. Where we are, we see the Facebook page. For all the latest updates, you can get it on Facebook. Put the SABC Newsroom in the search bar, like it, and you'll get all the latest updates there. Of course, the Rand is very much in the news. Record low, central bank moles intervention. That's what you can see on our page today. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
across the globe, locally, and on the entire continent. Every second, every minute, and every hour. There's always a breaking story. We commit to giving you the most important, significant, and interesting news. That's why it is not a surprise that more Africans are tuning to SABC News to find out what is happening. Because when news break, we've got you covered. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. South Africa's economic growth is expected to remain weak today. The Statistics South Africa will release second quarter gross domestic product figures. Meanwhile, Chinese stocks sank again this morning despite a rebound in markets elsewhere in Asia. The Transport Department says it will abide by the recommendations of the Public Protector into financial irregularities at the Passenger Rail Agency. Thuli Madonsela has found evidence of widespread impropriety in the awarding of tenders and urged steps against ALSIT CEO Lucky Montana. Meanwhile, Montana says he will approach the court to request that the Public Protector's report on the irregularities be set aside. And judgment against 8 former police officers accused of murdering Mozambican taxi driver Mido Masia is expected to be handed down soon in the High Court in Pretoria this morning. The accused have all pleaded not guilty. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Now, the story of Pierre and Yolandi Korki's kidnapping in 2013 was one that shook the nation. Their kidnapping by Al-Qaeda in the Yemen was described to be mistaken identity, as the captors thought the South Africans were American and demanded about 33 million rand ransom for Pierre. Yolandi managed to walk free, but Pierre Korki never returned home. Now, this past weekend, Yolandi Korki came face to face with the negotiator who secured her freedom from Al-Qaeda in 2014. This was the first meeting since that fateful event when the Gift of the Givers Yemen country manager Anas Al-Hamati met Yolandi. It was also time to finally put the pieces together as to what happened on the 6th of December 2014 when Pierre lost his life in a failed American military raid on his captors. Now, Gift of the Givers Yemen country manager Anas Al-Hamati joins us in studio this morning to talk to us about this ordeal. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Just tell us about this moment first, this weekend, when you reunited with Yolandi on Friday. It must have been a very special moment.
Of course. First time I saw Yolandi on Friday, I was very happy that I saw Yolandi return to her normal life and with her family. In the same moments, I feel a little sad because I don't implement my promise for her to release her husband. I really do my best, but something happened out of my control.
It was very difficult. It was a very difficult time. You risked your life and that of your family in that instance. Tell us about the tough negotiation periods that you had to go through to try and get the release first of Yolandi, but also with Pierre. Very difficult.
It was very difficult. So many times it was under really dangerous. So many times I said to Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, look, if anything happened for me, please take care of my family. Dangerous was many times, especially for one time when we met a leader from Al-Qaeda. He was a very aggressive man that he was trying to even arrest us. Also, after I took Yolandi, it was very hard mission to cross all checkpoints or all areas that under the control of militants to take Yolandi to a safe place.
Now, we of course heard the reports of what happened when Pierre died. Can you tell us your version of what happened with this botched military intervention by America that led to the death of Pierre Korki?
You know, when I heard that Pierre was killed, Dr. Suleiman sent me a message, said Pierre was killed in American force. They said, I'm shocked really, because I said it was just a few hours what was enough to take Pierre out. All logistics arrangements was ready to take Pierre out. Even passport, all things that we need, it was enough to take Pierre out. Just a few hours, but unfortunately.
It was a very difficult time for Pierre Corky. He went through so much and he stayed strong for so long. He became quite affected and quite ill towards the end of it. Do you think he would have made it back to South Africa if 100% if he wasn't killed in that raid?
Of course. Just a few hours, everything was ready. I can't believe that Pierre was killed, really, because very close. I feel it. He was in my hands, but just a few hours what we need. It was enough to take Pierre home.
Now, I want you to sketch the situation for South African viewers in the Yemen with the kinds of, let's call it the strength that Al-Qaeda and militant groups have in that country, how difficult it is for someone like yourself to deal with an intervention like this.
It's very hard to deal with like these people, because everything that is possible, maybe they can kill you, they can arrest you. But I try to be a friend of all of them. I try to represent myself as a negotiator. Don't have anything on my hands. That's why I try to be friends of them slowly. It's take a long time, because we need a peaceful way. It's take a long time and hard effort, but success is guaranteed.
You talk about being arrested by them. So in the Yemen, it's then fair to say that the authorities, the state authorities, are pretty much run by Al-Qaeda. Is that accurate?
Yes, sometimes there is so many areas it's even out of control of Yemen states.
Yeah.
That's why if we met in the desert, in a very far away areas. Everything was possible in that area.
Now, we understand that Yolandi, at the moment, she's working on a book. Has she spoken to you about this book that she's working on? And are you going to work with her on writing this book of this long, extended ordeal that you went through with the Corky family?
I met Yolandi and I tried to explain how she was released. Yolandi just was released. She don't know how the negotiation was. All the details from where I took Yolandi. What's first safe place we arrived at? How was the situation? Okay, because she just released, she don't know all the details. I tried to provide her all the details of the negotiation and take her out.
At that time, what I remember, what happened back with the negotiation, we in South Africa were told at the time that, Al-Qaeda was accusing you of taking the money that was being put forward and that they were going to kill you. That's the news that we got. Was that accurate about what happened at that time, that you were accused of taking the money and that you had to secure your family after that?
Of course, because during the negotiation, I was always say to them, the South African government, they will not pay anything, okay? And they will not, be sure, they will not pay anything. We will try to negotiate to take Yolandi out. After that, when there was a visit to Yemen by Deputy Minister, they said, look, he is coming. He'll say to all the media he will not pay, but under the table he pay.
Yeah.
Then you stole our money. That's why they tried to make threats, direct threats for me. I was forced to leave Yemen on 25th of January.
So that's shocking. Now, before we go, I also have been told that you'll be helping in the Stephen McGowan kidnapping case. Is that right? To what extent are you going to be involved?
I met Mohammed Yahya Diko, he's a gift of the givers negotiator in Mali. I tried to summarize all my experience, all my ideas about how he can deal with these people. Also because I know that the kidnappers have the same ideology.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Al-Hamati. We'd like to, here in South Africa, say thank you for the sterling work that you did in the release of Yolandi Corky, and we thought it was absolutely bravery in the extreme. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
The history of our country is characterized by too much forgetting.
It was Winnie Mandela and not Mandela's wife.
An explosion in South Africa that would make the French Revolution look like a very early morning picnic.
Southern Africa is like a zebra. You cannot put a bullet in the white stripe and think the animal will not die. It will die.
It has become difficult to avoid taking lives.
Now, highlighting the recent xenophobic attacks and in celebration of Heritage Month, the Chigovich Family Foundation is bringing Alexandra into the spotlight by engaging the youth through art. An exhibition called Art Crosses Borders Conversations will allow self-taught artists to exhibit alongside acclaimed artists from the Heritage Art Collection, one of the largest collections of its kind, with paintings by South African and African artists dating back as far as the 1970s. Now, joining us in studio is the founder of the Chigovich Family Foundation, Mr. Ivor Chigovich himself. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Before I start with the great work that you're doing, I want to talk about the level of talent that you've come across, in especially Alexandra. Were you impressed by what you've seen with young people?
You know, I continue to be amazed by the talent we have in this country and on this continent. And there's talent everywhere. And everybody, for some reason, everybody thinks that Soweto is where the cultural hub of this country is and where all the talent is. Nothing could be further from the truth. We're finding talent in Nelspruit and in Alex and in Pofadder and in Potchefstroom. It's unbelievable, the wealth of talent and creativity that we have. But most people don't realize that Alex has a long history of talent. It's a true melting pot. Somebody said to me a little while ago that when people from Soweto want a township experience, they have to go to Alex. And it's so true, because it really is an African township. It's not just about South African culture. It's about all African cultures coming together. And it's quite amazing, because it's literally 5 kilometers out of one of the biggest economic centers of the continent.
Creativity can't be suppressed, and it's something that really runs at the core of what being African is really about.
Absolutely. That's so true. And what we found as the foundation goes on to do its work is that there are so many amazing stories that have come out of the African Oral History Archive. Many of those stories are from very, very colourful people, and a lot of those people are creative people.
Yeah.
A lot of them defined themselves as politicians, but were politicians by necessity as opposed to being politicians by nature. And if you look at the creativity that we're finding in the art world today, this is where our real dialogue is happening. This is where we can tap into the real emotion on the street, which is so special and so important for our heritage.
And often we have such negative sentiments here in South Africa about our country, about our outlook, about our economy now, this week, and so forth. Would you say the narrative that you find amongst our artists is a much more positive one?
You have to keep in mind that artists, by nature, have their fingers on the pulse of what's really happening on the street.
Yeah.
And if you look at the collection that we've amassed over many years, you'll find that there are ups and downs in the mood and the tone. And you see that in the subject matter, you see it in the color, you see it in the energy that the art portrays. But the one thing that's for sure is that in African art, in South African art, there's always a sense of optimism. And I think that one of the challenges we have in this country right now is everybody is so negative. Everybody is bitching and moaning and being negative about the reality we find ourselves in today. But with the optimism that's out there, this country has an incredible future just because it's really there on the street.
At the heart of the work that you're doing with the foundation, of course, is xenophobia, which is probably the darkest moment in our history since democracy. Tell us about this a little bit, and also the decision to work with the youth in Alexandra.
Well, I think that the biggest challenge that we have in this country right now is there's this perception that the struggle is over.
Yeah.
And in reality, the struggle only started 20 years ago or 21 years ago. The struggle today is about different things. It's about cultural issues. It's about economic issues. And the xenophobic incidents that we've had in this country just go to show that there are many other issues we have to deal with. For South Africa to become truly great, it has to become part of Africa. And for many, many years through the apartheid regime, we were disconnected from the rest of Africa. So it's logical that South Africans and Africans are starting to find each other. And as unfortunate as the xenophobic attacks are, they have had one positive impact in that they have focused our minds on the fact that we have to Africanize South Africa. And by engaging with the youth in Alex, through art, through a creative medium, through a medium that's not only a cerebral medium, it's an emotional medium.
Yeah.
we're starting that dialogue, starting to allow the youth to engage with youth from other cultures, starting to understand their respective backgrounds and build mutual respect. And it's based on mutual respect that our country will grow.
Do you think we're finally ready now? Because I find in my business over the years, there's always this superficial connection with Africa. Yes, we are African. We have to do 1 or 2 stories about Africa. Do you think we've finally overcome that now and realize we have to keep it real with the rest of the continent? We have to do tangible, real things?
We don't have a choice. If South Africa does not become a meaningful contributor to the rest of the continent, not just economically, it will have no future. So for South Africa to Africanize is not an option. And I think we are ready now. I think that our leadership is ready. I think that our people are ready. And I think that the world is also starting to look at South Africa as part of Africa, where it didn't in the past. We were always this little geographic mistake, this little piece of Europe stuck onto the southern tip of Africa. That's changing.
Yeah, we have to integrate. We are integrating. But let's go back to the art. I want to talk about the mediums that the young people will be working in, and what's your expectation of the outcomes?
So we want art to become a far more important part of the educational curriculum in this country. Art has been used all over the world as a way to encourage creativity and to identify creative people. But unfortunately, because of the realities of budget constraints and priorities, art isn't a primary part of the South African curriculum. And what we want to do is show the education system the importance of art by running these workshops. We've partnered with Vicar Majoka in Alex, who has very, very bravely gone and created an art center. He's created his Art Smart brand in Alex and made Alex part of the art circuit, if you like. And through that, we want to bring young people into the facility, let them engage with established artists, let Vicar share his experiences as a struggle artist who was also involved in xenophobia, in fact, survived xenophobic attacks, and let people use various mediums to express themselves and to get their deepest anxieties and deepest concerns out on pieces of paper.
Do you think this is the process, the healing? We know when we go for therapy, art is normally one of the first mediums that we use. When we talk about the healing South Africa and healing ourselves, because in a way I think we're all suffering a little bit. You think art can be that vehicle in schools that could heal us?
It absolutely is, and it's been proven all over the world that art has a huge therapeutic capacity. But more importantly, it's not just about healing, it's also about discovery. It's about people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different reference systems, visually portraying who they are and where they come from and how they see the world. And one of the great things about South Africa is that we've got a democracy, we've got a constitution that allows freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. What we now have to do is teach tolerance. We need to get people to understand that we truly are not a rainbow nation, but we're a potpourri of cultures from all over the world, and our success will come from respecting our differences. And art does that. Art allows that.
You know, my job often leaves me close to tears when I go home. Today I'm going with a smile on my face. I thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to meet you, and you're doing fantastic work through this. I really think it's something that we need to take a little bit more seriously in our curriculums, in our schools, everywhere. We need to paint those beautiful pictures that's in our hearts and minds. Mr. Chikovich, I thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Now back to the sad news. At least 8 police officers have been killed in Western Nepal in clashes during demonstrations over proposed new constitution there. So the police aren't only dying in South Africa, they're dying all over the world, it seems. Let's take a look at some of the social media views that have come in around us. Rabin Kaki says, protests creating violence in the name of politics, religion for their pro-state demand is a shame. The Nepal government needs stricter policy, he says. Santosh says, absolute insanity to burn policemen for the excuse of protest. Within Nepal, we think we are peaceful, but our image is getting big globally, he says. Not good. Nepali journalist says it was not a protest, rather a terrorist attack involving the burning of police officers who called for restraint. That from Nepali journalists. That's a tweet. Well, that's where we wrap it. I'm getting up. and getting out of here. Newsroom, of course, is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Don't forget, we also stream live on YouTube at that time with the entire show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching the show, Newsroom, where we love it in the morning. See you tomorrow.